Hello, good afternoon. Welcome everyone. Thanks for coming today to Kentucky Spin's Lunch and Learn 18 and Going Places. My name is Amber Ham and I am the Training and Outreach Coordinator with Kentucky Spin. We're glad to have you all here. As you see in the bottom, if you have any questions moving forward, there is a Q&A box option. Please feel free at any time to ask any questions that you may have. As we see those come in, we can let Abby know, and we will get those answered as soon as possible. Abby, if you want to move on to the next, thank you. So who are Kentucky Spin? Who are we? We are the Special Parent Involvement Network. We are the Parent Training and Information PTI Center for Kentucky. We were funded by the U.S. Department of Education under IDEA since 1988, when Kentucky first received a PTI. Kentucky Spin Parent Center provides training, information, and support for children and youth with all types of disabilities, birth through 26 years old and beyond, as well as their families. And one thing about us at Kentucky Spin, we're never going to turn anyone away. So we don't ask when someone calls in for support or assistance, specifically if they have a disability. We're here to help support the families across the state of Kentucky. And at this time, I'm going to introduce Abby O'Keefe, our transition age parent educator.
Well, thank you, Amber, and good morning. So Amber said good afternoon, but for those of us on the western side of the state, I'm going to say good morning to everybody who's on the western side, and good afternoon to everybody who's on the eastern side. So today we're going to be talking about transitioning. Transitioning to adulthood is a pretty big job, and it's not for just one person. It's for youth, it's for parents, it's for caregivers, and there are tons of areas that we have to cover. Today, we're covering 8, but there are so many more that we need to address. There's things like community involvement and financials and so on and so forth. But we don't have time to talk about that in an hour. I could spend weeks talking about all of that, and we'd still have more to talk about. So today we're going to cover just these 8 sections. So we're going to talk about selective services. We're going to talk about OVR, or what's also referred to as vocational rehabilitation, post-secondary education options, healthcare options, transitioning, guardianship or supported decision-making, transportation, housing, and voting. And I just want to say, this is a huge topic and I'm very, very passionate about it. So if you have questions, feel free to reach out in the Q&A box. I have a daughter who's 19, and about 4.5, 5 years ago, I woke up in a panic because I realized she was going to turn 18. And I knew we were not prepared. And at the time, 4 or 5 years ago, there wasn't a lot of information out there for me. I was scrambling to try to find the things that we needed to do for her. You guys are all lucky because right now you're searching for information and there's a lot of help out there. There's tons of resources. Sometimes they're hard to access, but that's why Kentucky Spin is here, because we can help you find those resources that you need. So make sure, if you haven't already, go ahead and sign up for our newsletters, check out our website. And then at the end of this webinar, I'm going to keep saying it over and over, but at the end of the webinar, we do have resources that you can click on and links. And I would encourage you to go do that, because you can never be too prepared. All right. And you'll find out that that's what I am, just one person who just loves to be prepared. So first, let's talk about this funny little word, the age of majority. I guess it's 3 words, really. And what is the age of majority? Okay, that's the term we use when we talk about someone who turns 18. When someone has a birthday and they turn 18, that means that the government and basically everybody else thinks that that person, that 18-year-old, is now fully responsible for all of their decisions and all the consequences of those decisions, okay? So before 18, it's the parents, right? Or caregivers or guardians. We make the decisions. Before my daughter turned 18, I chose what medicines she had. I chose what doctor she went to go see. I chose what kind of soap and what kind of toothpaste she used. I made all of her banking decisions, and I made all of her educational decisions in regards to her IEPs and therapies and all sorts of stuff. So I made that. And as parents and caregivers and guardians, that's our job. We're there to be responsible for these children, to make sure that they survive, right? And not only survive, that they thrive. But what happens is they turn from one day to the very next. And it seems so crazy to me. There's no little warm, fuzzy month that they get to readjust or anything like that. No, we go straight from happy birthday, you're 18, and now it's all you. So when a student or a youth turns 18, they become the individual decision makers. It is all about them. At that point, the government and everyone else has decided that they are responsible for their health care. They are responsible for their personal care, their financials, and their education. And there are things that we can work on prior to that 18 that makes that shift, that one day, not so scary. Because I'll be honest, I was terrified. And I have a neurotypical son as well, and I'm kind of terrified about him too, but on a totally different level. But there are things that we can do and we can prepare. And I'm hoping that today, as we kind of work through some of the things that you can do for individuals with disabilities, it might help you start to see how we can prepare and how we can make that adjustment really smooth and kind of go a little bit more fluidly for us. Okay. So the first one, people freak out over this. So first, I want everybody to stop, take a deep breath. Selective services. Okay, I have to bring this up because it's very important, but do not panic. Selective services is the United States requiring all males to sign up for selective services, what we used to call the draft. There is a website. We have the link at the end of this presentation. All males are required to do that, disability or no. There's only 2 exemptions. The first exemption is if a man is unable to leave his home without medical assistance. And that's not just with a caregiver, it has to be somebody like an EMT or a nurse. So if they cannot leave the home without medical assistance, or if they are placed in a long-term care facility or a mental institution on their 18th birthday, they also do not have to register. Anyone else has to register. Now, just because they're registered does not mean that they're going to be required to serve, okay? So each of the military branches has their own screenings, and they do mental evaluations and physical evaluations. So many of those candidates that are, registered are never going to be called to service. But you do have to do it. And if you don't do it, there's some repercussions. Failure to register can result to fines. You could get fined for it. But even bigger is if you have a student that is interested in participating in maybe post-secondary education, and you think you're going to need financial aid, they can be denied financial aid if they haven't already registered. So this is just kind of a heads up for you. It's out there. You have to do it. There's a link at the end of this. A lot of times schools have information on how to sign up for selective services. It's a pretty simple process. You just got to get it done. So that's it. So now let's get to some more of the nitty-gritty that covers both male and female. OVR. So what is OVR? OVR is the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation. And what does that mean, really? Well, the OVR has a mission statement, and their mission statement is all Kentuckians with disabilities have an essential part of Kentucky's workforce and their communities. What does that mean, really? It means all Kentuckians, disability or not, deserve competitive, integrated employment. What does competitive, integrated employment mean? It means that individuals with disabilities should have the right to have a job where they work with non-disabled peers and they earn a livable wage, okay? And so what OVR does is they work with individuals to develop the skills necessary so that they can go out into the workforce and participate in competitive integrated employment, all right? So some of the ways they can do that are they offer counseling and guidance. They can offer personal skill development, like how to check your calendar, how to read your emails, how to fill out a job application. They can help you with finding and funding vocational training. You wanted to do welding, they can help you with that. If you want to do cosmetology, they can work with you on that. They also provide supported employment. They do all these things. What you do is I guess I should talk about how you can access them. So you access them through your high school. Usually your senior year of high school, there is a final meeting. And at that final transition meeting, IEP transition meeting, a voc rehab counselor is usually invited, and you can start the process of applying then. Or if you've missed that, like maybe you moved in from out of state, or you didn't need it in high school, but you do now, you've decided that it's important, you can contact your local OVR office and they will set you up with an appointment. When you go to that appointment, you're going to submit some documents. So you need to make sure you have this stuff and you start keeping track of this. Things like your IEPs or any 504 plans that you've had, keep those. They're very important. Medical records stating your disabilities, therapist reports are also important. They do ask for your Social Security card and a form of identification when you apply. What a voc rehab counselor will do is you'll apply, and then they will, if you're accepted, they're going to review all your documentations and see if that you fit their program needs. They'll work with your individual with a disability, and they'll create, and I know, I'm going to say it right now, I am so sorry. They create an IPE. Instead of an IEP, they create an IPE, which is an individualized personal employment plan. And so they're going to work with you. They'll find out what goals you have, and then they'll help you find ways to achieve those goals. Okay. OVR or voc rehab is kind of set up into two different sections. There's a section that works in high school. You can actually start accessing OVR or what we call pre-ed, which is called pre-employment transition services, at the age of 14. So any 14-year-old can receive these pre-ed services. Sometimes they can actually receive them in the school itself. But sometimes you have to call the OVR office and talk to the person in charge of pre-eds, and they can go through the application process, and then they can help you find someone who provides those skills to 14, 15, and 16-year-olds. The skills that pre-eds provide are usually things like career inventories, taking a look at what kind of careers are out there, some exploration. They might provide some one-on-one skills on job interviewing, job interview practices, or maybe they'll even just do some basics like what kind of things somebody's interested in and explore individualized areas that somebody says they're interested in. So if they want to do cartoon work, or if they want to work in a factory, they might help them look at the different things that those jobs require so that they'll be more prepared by the time they're 18. So you would do the pre-eds first, and then at 18 years old, you would then move on into the actual voc rehabilitation. At the end of this webinar, we do have a one-page flyer that speaks about pre-eds and all of the information that you need to go out, seek out those services. Okay. So employment is one area, and so that's OVR. OVR can help us with employment, and it can help us with integrating into the community. Another thing that you need to start thinking about is possibly post-secondary education. Now, when an individual graduates from high school, they have choices. People with disabilities or people without disabilities have the same choices. You can either go to work or you can continue on to school. People with disabilities have the same options. There are university programs for people with disabilities. Some of those are degree programs. So you would go in, you could just take the same courses as everyone else, graduate with a bachelor's degree or an associate's degree. Or there are programs that you can attend a university or community college and you get a certificate. Those are called CTP programs. Okay, we have 5 of them currently approved in the state of Kentucky. There's one at UK, there's one at Murray. I can give you a list of all the other ones. Those are programs that are set up. Currently, they're only day programs. So that means they're non-residential, but they're set up so that individuals with disabilities can go to a campus. They have certain classes that are just for them, which might be independent living skills classes, cooking classes, relationship classes, and they also do internships. So they do work-related internships in these programs. But they are required, because they're a CTP, they are required to go to regular college classrooms and be in classrooms with non-disabled individuals. So it gives them a sense of community, it gives them a sense of involvement. Those CTP programs you can apply for federal aid for. So it is possible to get student loans for individuals with disabilities to attend those CTP programs. They can also, as I said, they can do degree seeking programs if they want. They can go to trade schools and they can go to any kind of training program. The thing is community colleges and universities, trade schools and training programs, all of them fall under the 504 if they receive federal funds. And so all of them, if they receive federal funding whatsoever, they will have an Office of Disability, and that Office of Disability will work with the students to see if they're allowed to have or receive any kind of accommodations for their disability. And here's the tricky part. Once they turn 18, guess who gets to talk to the Office of Disability? Parents? No, the youth. So you need to make sure that you are working really hard. If post-secondary education is an important part of your youth's transition, then you need to make sure that they understand how to self-advocate, how to identify their own needs, how to identify their goals, because they are going to be the ones that the schools will talk with, not the parents, okay? And I'm going to tell you a story, and you're probably going to be like, will she ever stop talking about herself? But I'm going to tell you a story, and this is about my daughter. She goes to a school in Florida, and she asked us to come down for Parents Weekend. And we went down for Parents Weekend, and it's a specialty school. It's a school for only children with or youth with autism and specific learning disabilities. And so their Parents Weekends are different. Their Parents Weekends are you go down and you speak to therapists, and you go down and you speak to professors, and you go down and you track all this information. And my husband and I, we were so geared up. We're like, yes, this is awesome. This is great. We made all the appointments. We got it all set up. We got on the plane, flew down there, got the hotel, everything. We go to the first meeting, and her learning specialist as sitting in the room with my daughter, my husband, and I, and the learning specialist. And the learning specialist said, okay, Neve, well, since you're over 18, you have the right to tell us what we tell your parents. And at that moment, Neve said, that's my daughter, sorry, I probably shouldn't say her name, but she looked at me and she said, you can tell them I'm doing great. That's it. So we made that entire trip, and that's all the information they were allowed to tell us. Now, obviously, as a parent, we had to talk to her about that afterwards, but I'm just trying to, I want to bring that up to you because you need to understand that we as parents start to lose a little bit of control, and we need to make sure that they're able to self-advocate because they're the ones who are going to take it over, and they have the right to tell us no. So in this case, when it comes to preparing for post-secondary education, just keep in mind that even though you're paying the bill, it does not necessarily mean that the school has to work with you. So make sure that that's a conversation that you have with your youth prior to them enrolling into a school, because if you need more information from them, you're going to have to get it from them. Okay. All right, so past that, we're going to move on to healthcare. Okay, healthcare. Healthcare is huge. Healthcare is complicated. Healthcare is frightening when it comes to transitioning. Before the age of 18, it is important to start transitioning the healthcare. Why? Well, I can tell you there's several reasons. Insurance policies change, right? When somebody turns 18, things change. Doctors, when you have a pediatrician, the pediatrician usually has a network of pediatric doctors. There's fewer of them. So if you have medically fragile students or youth, what's going to happen is that usually pediatric physicians work together. They're very close. You might even go to a pediatric hospital and be able to get all the information you need. Pediatric doctors talk to parents a lot more. They're used to parents. They're used to talking to kids. They set aside longer periods of time for their clinics to talk to the individuals. Okay. There's all sorts of things that happen when you turn 18. You're going to have to switch doctors, most likely. Most likely, all those pediatricians that you've come to know and love are not going to see kids after the age of 18. Sometimes they'll go up to age 21. If you're lucky, you may have established with a general practitioner who covers all ages, but they're not always that. It's not always the case. I would recommend at the age of 18 that parents establish or ask their youth, because it's the youth's choice at this point, unless for an healthcare power of attorney. This is similar to, like, if you've ever heard of power of attorneys before. A healthcare power of attorney establishes that the student or the youth is allowing the parents to be able to make decisions on healthcare needs. Now, we actually have done that with our daughter, and we will do so with our neurotypical son as well. It just makes sense for us if our children are away and if an accident happens and they need help. I would like to be the one to help make those decisions if they're unable to do so. And that is what that healthcare POA does. It also establishes the ability for parents to talk to physicians. If I have questions about my daughter's healthcare, if she decides to change her medicines, or if she decides to change her care, her plan of care, I can speak to that doctor individually and express my concerns, and we can kind of come in as a team. Without that POA, I don't have that option, okay? But there are things you can also do with the youth before the age of 18. Things that they need to start being able to do on their own. You need to sit down with them and create a family health portrait. You need to decide, figure out, like, usually they want to know information about mom and dad and siblings. Those are information that they're always asked. I mean, we've all been to the doctor. We know You walk in, you get that form, it's 7,000 pages long, and then you just rush through and answer questions about glaucoma and diabetes and all those things. Well, they need to know that. They need to have access to that information to the best, most possible situation. They need to know that information as much as they can. They need to understand and identify what medicines they have. They need to know the prescription, the dosage of those medicines. They need to know the use of those medicines. You also need to start working with them before the age of 18 on over-the-counter prescription, like non-prescription medication. Zyrtec, aspirin, Tylenol, those are things that they're going to come in contact with, because once they turn 18, you may not always be there. We found that out too. You know, you say your daughter comes to you and says, I'm going to go to the doctor, or I'm going to go to the pharmacy and pick up some Tylenol. And so you're like, but which Tylenol are you going to pick up? And they need to know that there's different types of Tylenols. They need to understand all of that information. And these are things that we can actually start with early. And the earlier you can do it, even as the medicines change, there are things that we can do to make those shifts better. But if they know that the medicine and their disabilities and their diagnoses are their responsibility, then they're going to take it as a responsibility once they turn 18. And the final thing is creating a medical care plan for themselves, a personal plan. And we have one of these on our website, and I would highly recommend that you go out and download it if you know of a youth that is transitioning. As I said before, I'm a planner. I am a planner to the 5,000th degree. I love to plan, but I am not perfect, and I do not foresee everything that happens. And we ran into a situation where there was a medical emergency, and we did not have one of these personal medical plans in place, and it would have helped us. Now you're saying, what is this personal medical plan? Well, it's just a one-page document, and it's going to cover things like the prescriptions, the diagnosis, some just high-level details. But it also is going to contain information like, I do better with the lights turned off. I do better when I'm warm, or I do better when I'm cold. Little things to do, because if you think about it, if somebody is in a medical emergency, they're not going to be able, well, I know I couldn't. Maybe there's probably people out there who could, but I don't necessarily think about everything that will help me in the middle of an emergency. I'm dealing with the fact that I'm in pain. I'm dealing with the fact that I'm scared. There's all those things. So I'm not going to stop and say, oh, by the way, my dosage of fluoxetine is 36 milligrams. But if you have that, if you've created a medical plan, like a little medical personal plan, and you screenshot it on your phone, then you can bring that up and you can share that with emergency room personnel, and they might be able to alleviate some of the trauma and some of the anxiety by just following some of the things like keeping us warm, keeping the lights down low, those type of things. So healthcare, it's important and it's tough, but we can all do it, right? Okay. I don't even know where to go on this one. This one's a hard one. And I'm just going to be honest with you. Guardianship, supported decision-making, curatorship, those are days long of information. They are very complicated. They are very challenging. And actually, they are very emotional. These are very tough decisions to make. And we at KYSPIN have tons. You can go out to our website. We have webinars on guardianship and supported decision making. We have infographics. We have lots of information on there. It's a lot to process, and it's a lot of information. You need to start early, and you need to start looking at things. And I'm going to just quickly touch on just these two, guardianship and supported decision-making, give you kind of a brief overview about the choices and the options. And then if you have questions, you can reach out to us at Kentucky SPIN, or you can go do your own research wherever you choose. Kentucky Protection and Advocacy is a fabulous place, a wealth of information. But do your own research and start early on your research, because these are big decisions that you have to make and you cannot take them lightly. But I think the biggest part before 18 that you need to start thinking about is self-determination. And that's not for you as caregivers and parents, that's for the youth. I am a very, very strong proponent of what they call person-centered planning, okay? I believe that every individual has the right to make their own decisions, and it is my job to support them in that right. It is my job to understand what they want as the person, and then I will plan around them what they need to get there, right? So self-determination is key when you're thinking about guardianship or supported decision-making. All right, guardianship has many people need guardianship. Many people do well in guardianship, and it is very important that we have it. Okay, it requires legal representation. There are fees. It can be a very lengthy process. Sometimes it is very challenging to end it once you get guardianship. Sometimes it's hard to end that guardianship. There is the ability for the judge to pick and choose what kind of rights the individual has. Just because you're under a guardianship doesn't mean you don't get to vote. The judge can determine that you can vote. You can have voting rights and have a guardianship. Sometimes there's issues with guardianship and driving. Those are all things that you have to think about when you're looking at this guardianship process. And one that I'm not going to overlook is that there are mental and emotional risks involved. It is very hard for someone to be told that they can't make their own decisions. So all of those things you need to look at when you're exploring guardianship. Okay, now on the flip side, there is supported decision-making. It is also very challenging. It has its pros and cons. Both of them have pros and cons. I'm not going to tell you which one's better. I can tell you which one worked for us, but that's just our family. Supported decision-making doesn't require any financial output at all. But it's not legally recognized necessarily in a lot of states. It's unknown by a lot of people. It requires a huge amount of support. So what is supported decision-making? For those of you who don't know, supported decision-making is when you have an individual, say with a disability, they will sit down with a parent or caregiver or guardian, and you kind of discuss back and forth. What do you need help with making decisions on? How do you feel about your health care? Do you think you can make a choice of what medicines you take by yourself? If they say, no, I can't tell you what medicines I should take, then maybe that's something that you then have to find some support for. And then the individual, the youth involved, will then take the time with their parents, and they kind of sit down together and create a village, right? So you create a village of individuals that your youth feels comfortable in asking those questions. Now, the reason why I'm saying you have to start this so early, because guardianship takes a long time. It's a lengthy process. Supported decision-making is a super lengthy process. And I'm going to tell you, we started this one when my daughter was 14. We identified the people, but it takes a lot of effort for both the parent and the youth to get that strong support system going. Because it's not just the youth talking to their parents. You need to set up for them other people besides parents. So we have family friends, we have nieces, we have aunts and uncles, that all of those are individuals that my daughter has identified as people that she feels comfortable asking questions to. And that gives her the ability to ask people besides her parents for help. It's very hard for parents because we lose that control, and we have to acknowledge that we're losing that control, because it is super hard. And let me tell you, I'm telling you from experience, it is super hard when your daughter calls your family friend to ask them financial advice and you know what you want her to do. But that's all part of self-determination, and it's all part about being independent. As her parent, I am trying to promote her independence. So I have to let her make those decisions, because remember, just because she has a disability doesn't mean she doesn't have the right to her individuality. I would never, now I would tell my son, right? I would tell my son that I didn't appreciate what kind of choices he was making or what have you. But I would also not be able to stop him once he turned 18. So that was our choice with supported decision making. But as I said, guardianship is also a good choice for some families. And I would recommend that you really do your research prior to, so that you can make an adequate choice going forward. Okay, transportation. Now, we all live in Kentucky, and I love Kentucky. I love the bluegrass. I love all the fields, but what I don't love is the lack of transportation. Transportation is very, very hard for individuals with disabilities in Kentucky. There's not a lot of options. We have the option to drive. Vocational rehab, as I mentioned before, they actually have a driving program. They will help individuals pass the permit test, and then they have driving education classes for them that can help individuals get the driver's license. So if they have the option of getting the driver's license, that makes things a lot easier for them. However, not everyone has the option of driving. Voc rehab, physical disabilities, you can still drive. There are Voc rehab can help people with visual disabilities, and there's also augmentation for other individuals with other physical disabilities. But sometimes driving just isn't an option. So there's not a lot of things that you can access. There is the Medicaid transport, which is the NEMT, which is non-emergency medical transportation. That takes individuals who cannot drive back and forth to non-emergency medical appointments. So doctor's appointments, therapist appointments, those type of things. You can only use that once a day. And unfortunately, it's just non-emergency medical use. So there's not much you can do besides that. If you are lucky and you live in a city that has a bus system, you do have the opportunity to do some kind of a paratransit situation, which that is an ADA requires bus systems to provide busing for individuals with disabilities. You have to sign up for it. You usually apply. And if you're selected, then there is the possibility that you would be picked up in a van, some other kind of vehicle from a non-bus stop. You have to prove that you have to prove that the regular bus schedule is not going to work for you. So either you can't get to the bus stop because of physical limitations, you can't wait at the bus stop because if a bus is late, maybe you have a disability where you'll have a tendency to wander off, or some kind of a dangerous situation. So you have to prove one of those factors, and then you would be able to sign up for this ADA paratransit. You would call them 24 hours in advance, you would schedule it, the bus would pick you up, and they would take you to wherever you need to go. there are limitations, and that is where the problem lies, because the paratransit only is responsible for picking you up if you live 3/4 of a mile or less from a bus stop. So even in cities, I live in Bowling Green. Even though I live within the city limits, I don't live 3/4 of a mile from a bus stop. So that is not an option for me. That it won't work. You also have to recognize that with the paratransit, they have to follow the bus. They're not required to work outside of the bus. What do I call it? Time frame, the bus schedule. So if you have a job that you get off the work at 9 o'clock, but the bus schedule stops running at 8 o'clock, they're not required to come pick you up and take you home. So there are some factors in that you have to consider. Finally, and I know people get mad when I mention this, Uber, Lyft, and taxis, they all have disability requirements, and they are all supposed to have vehicles that can handle individuals with disabilities in the Uber, Lyft, or taxi. I don't know for fact if that happens in Kentucky. I'm going to say in certain rural areas, I would be hard pressed to find a disability van or something that would come pick you up, Uber and Lyft. But they do state that they are supposed to. And I would also like to point out, this is kind of just a side note on my own personal, but even though Uber, Lyft, and taxis are expensive, and hopefully they're not practical. They would not be practical for everyday use, right? I mean, that would be either having a car share rider line, a bus, something like that for everyday to and from a job. Uber and Lyft would be way too expensive for that. But I do sincerely want to stress that anyone under the age of 18 should probably start looking at how to Uber, Lyft, or grab a taxi. You never know. Again, it just comes back to those emergency situations. Again, my daughter is away from us, and there's nothing like having to try to walk somebody through getting an Uber because she got left someplace. That's a terrifying thing for a parent. And in retrospect, it would have been much nicer if I had already downloaded an Uber app and taught her how to Uber, so that I didn't have to panic when she calls up and says, my friends left me. Because it happens. It just does. Life happens. So I'm just going to recommend that you kind of look at all these options as you're starting to scooch towards 18. Because transportation is going to be a huge decision maker in certain other areas that you're going to come across. Okay, so I've talked enough. I've talked a really long time. So we're going to play a little moment. Now, I don't know if I have access to the chat box. I'm going to look and see. But I want everybody who's out there to take a look at these pictures. And we're going to play Would You Rather. And we're going to take a poll to see who wants to live in the mountain home, who wants to live in that looks like it's a farm home, I think that's a farm home here in Kentucky. Who wants to live in the beach, and who would like to live in an urban environment, like downtown in an urban environment? And Amber, is it possible, can you see the chats? If anybody wants to throw out a chat where, oh, Amber wants to do the beach, look at all these beaches. Oh, Kelly's in an apartment. Okay. So it looks like there's lots of beaches. There are a couple of apartments, and there's a farm. That's impressive. The farm. That's a lot of work. Farms are lots of work. Okay. So let's see. Okay, there's a few more, and then I'll move on, because you're probably thinking, why is she? Oh, a couple mountains. Wow. I want a home that cleans its, oh my gosh, Angela, yes, I want a home that cleans myself too. I do. Okay, so now you're like, why is she talking about this? And this is why, because we're going to talk about housing now, right? just like you have opinions. Now, granted, those are our opinions. We want to live those places. We don't necessarily get to live those places. I would love to live on the beach. I don't get to live on the beach, right? But individuals with disabilities also have their opinions, right? They get to decide things. They get to decide things like, do I want to live with family? Do I want to live with friends? Do I want to live in an apartment? Do I want to live in the country? All of those things tie in, but where it really makes things difficult are all of the other factors that we have to think about. And that's why, again, you have to start planning early and you have to start thinking about things early, because it is so important for us to gel them all together. And what I mean by that is, that we have housing requirements, but those housing requirements are going to be based on our transportation requirements. And those transportation requirements are going to be based on our job requirements. And so we have to make sure that we are really understanding everything about every aspect that we're working with. So when we start talking about housing, we need to talk to them, our students, about, so when you decide to move out, not that they're going to move out the minute they turn 18, right? This is a process. Do you think you'd want to live with family, or do you think you'd want to have friends? Do you want to live with friends? What do you think? Either way, or maybe they want to do independent living. Maybe they really truly just want to be on their own, and that's an option too. There's options, all sorts of options. We have in Kentucky, we have group homes and we have supported living homes. We have assisted living and skilled care homes, nursing homes. We also have, what's important for you to know is Section 8 housing. Now, Section 8 housing is it's kind of a broad overview. They do actually have lots of different variants of Section 8 housing. And the one thing I'm going to talk to you about is when your youth turns 18, you might want to go see about registering them for a housing waiver. Now, you're probably asking, what is a housing waiver? Well, part of what HUD does is they have Section 8 housing, which is what we know, like apartment buildings that are for low income, and people with disabilities or low income can just live there, but it's specific to that building. But now they have these housing waivers available where you sign up and you get on a wait list. And once the wait list is over, then you are given a housing waiver. So you are able to go to an apartment, or you are able to go to a house and say, hey, I have this waiver. They're going to pay this amount of money per month for me to live, and then I'll pay the additional. So it's kind of like they just give you, it's kind of like a bonus, not really a bonus, but they'll cover a specific portion of your rent. And why that's important is that once so if my daughter applies for the housing waiver here in Bowling Green, Kentucky, and so she might be on the waiver list for 2 years, 3 years, say she gets her housing waiver, and then at that point, she is required to find housing in Bowling Green, Kentucky for 1 year, and she must stay in Bowling Green, Kentucky for a year. But once that year is up, she can move anywhere she wants, and that waiver goes with her. Okay. So as long as she is consistently using that waiver and she is still meets the income requirements for that waiver will travel with her, and she will be able to use it even if she needs to move. So that's something that you need to start thinking about as well if you're looking into someone who wants to eventually move away to a more expensive part of the state or the country for that matter. So take a look at those waivers. Okay, and finally, this is it. I swear to you, I'm almost done talking. I'm sorry this has taken so long. Voting. Voting is the biggest privilege that an individual receives when they turn 18, okay? We talk a lot here at Kentucky Spin about self-advocacy. Self-advocacy is speaking up for yourself, speaking up for your needs, speaking up for your wants. Well, voting is self-advocacy, only what it's doing is speaking up for a larger picture. We try to share with our children at all times that voting matters because that is our voice, right? And individuals with disabilities have a voice, and they need to know that they have a voice. Now, voting can be very scary. We have tons of voting resources on our website, but in the state of Kentucky, as long as you are 18, by the general election, you can register to vote. You can register to vote usually at schools. You can register to vote at Medicaid SNAP offices. You can register to vote at the county clerk's office, and even online. So when someone hits 18, we highly recommend that we get them registered because their voice matters. And, you know, you'd be surprised at how much information people take in and they're willing to work with, and that they want their voices heard. And we would encourage you to let them do so by getting them registered to vote and walking them through the steps of voting. So that is kind of the last slide, Amber, except I'm going to talk to you really quickly. Amber's ready to go. We do have, I mentioned to you that we have tons of resources on our website. These are just a few, okay? So I've got over here on the website, caregiver resources. That's on, well, it's on my left. I'm gonna assume it's on your left too. I don't know how this Zoom thing works. So I have started, these are some flyers, they're one-pagers that try to cover these topics for, and they're not necessarily for individuals, youth, they're not youth-oriented infographics. These are more for parents, caregivers, professionals. It's a quick hit on like, here's housing, here's what you can have, here's what you need, here's how to prepare, and then go. We have lots of resources for youth. They're on our website, but I do want to point out that every Tuesday we do, or not every Tuesday, oh my gosh, they would kill me if it was every Tuesday, but once a month on the fourth Tuesday, we have Nick and Davis, and they put on a Transition Tuesday for youth. So it is information designed specifically for youth that are transitioning. That covers topics like what we're talking about today, but sometimes they cover them more in depth. They might cover healthcare. We actually have on our January youth news is going to be all healthcare, and it's going to have practice how to make your like scripts for making doctor's appointments, and it has all the kind of resources that I've mentioned throughout this particular webinar. So I would highly recommend that you check out our resources online and reach out to us if you have any questions. And then I think now, Amber, you can talk. I think I'm done.
Well, as Abby said, we have many resources available for our youth and young adults on our website. And as well, there are clickable links here in the PowerPoint that has been provided to you during today's webinar. I do want to touch briefly on what Abby was saying as far as Transition Tuesdays on the fourth Tuesday of the month. It's extremely unique because Davis and Nick are our youths, and a unique perspective having youth speak to other youth about issues that they may encounter and how to successfully complete tasks. It's a wonderful opportunity. If you are working with youth, if you have a youth, please let them know about that. We also have a parent support group that we hold monthly. That is going to be taking place this coming Monday. And we do that at 10 a.m. Eastern as well as 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we are going to be talking about partnership and communication. During our support group, we provide a small training, and then we go into a parent cafe, which is another wonderful and unique way to connect and partner with other parents across the state of Kentucky. And keep an eye out also for our upcoming Lunch and Learn. So we really encourage everyone to go to KentuckySpin.com and sign up for our mailing list. If you don't mind, you see a QR code listed on your screen. That will take you to an evaluation link. We would very much appreciate for you all to fill that out today. We value the voices of the families across the state of Kentucky. We want to know, what did you love? What did you like? What did you not like so much? And what can we do to better suit your needs? That's why we're here. We want to hear it all. So please take a moment and fill that survey out. And we want to say thank you again for giving us your time today and just being with us. And we hope to see you soon at some of our upcoming events.